major country, in a different kind of way, the brand was emphasized. Here is British imperialism at its height on a biscuit pack, I think. Here is the French Exposition Nationale Coloniale in Marseille in 1922, talking about the French Empire and the nature of it. Here is a biscuit tin of Britain, with Britain and India and its Indian empire. Here is another one, Empress brand condensed milk. The Germans were certainly no farther behind. Here is Norddeutsche Lloyd advertising its Bremen ship in the late 19th century again. We think of changes of name. A number of people have said to me today, what about Wolff Olins and Weber and Viag and Eon? We think of all that as very new. What are you trying to do, creating new brands and so on. In Britain in 1917, the House of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, which at that time was engaged in a war with Germany, decided that it would be more comfortable for everybody if it changed its name to Windsor. So brand name changes are not new either. The English royal family did it in 1917. So what else is new? What's interesting is that the external audience now is becoming more and more important for the nation, and the internal audience has become more and more and more important for the company. When two national organizations like Daimler-Benz and Chrysler get together, what is happening is that there are two national brands, two very, very clear manifestations of a national idea which come together in one company. And at the time that it all happened, this is 1996, whatever it is, or 1998, buoyant forecast for Daimler-Chrysler. At the time that it all happened, I don't know how many people were thinking, both in the organization and outside it, about what dealers would do, for example, with dealerships. Was there to be Mercedes-Benz and Chrysler, one single dealership? Were the dealers who represented Mercedes-Benz with the Mercedes-Benz idea of Teutonic efficiency and high prices for the most sophisticated products that could be produced, how did that match with the Chrysler idea of an American product, which was totally different? Was there any thought given to the idea of dealerships together? Was there any thought given to the idea that these two brands, these two icons, the Jeep, an icon of American open spaces, wide open spaces, Arizona, Marlboro cigarettes and all that kind of stuff, linked with the Mercedes-Benz idea, which is the apotheosis of German technology, available to everybody, available to more or less everybody at any rate. Was that thought through carefully? And if so, what kind of a corporation would it be? Would it be a German corporation? Clearly it couldn't be, because what would happen to the American brand? Would it be an American corporation? Clearly it couldn't be, because what would happen to the German brand? 2 or 3 or 4 years later, these are the kinds of remarks that are being made about this organization, which is in deep trouble for all kinds of reasons, one of which is that it has failed to reconcile the nature of the corporate entity, which must be if not trinational, because we're now talking about Mitsubishi Motors too, which must be supranational, as opposed to the brands which derive their strength from being national. So we get these kinds of remarks. Jürgen Schrempp, the embattled boss of Daimler-Chrysler, is touring Europe and American financial centers to persuade investors that his plan to spend losses at Chrysler and rescue its 3-year-old marriage to Daimler-Benz will work. Fine. The really difficult part is going to be achieving economies of scale by weaving together 3 vehicle makers. Fine, weaving together 3 vehicle makers to make what? To make vehicles that are identical? Can Mr. Schrempp and his top managers rise to both challenges simultaneously? The Germans failed to integrate Chrysler, fearful of upsetting American managers and of tainting the Mercedes brand by close association with redneck trucks. Well, that's putting it a bit strongly, because Chrysler make things other than redneck trucks, but still. Now Daimler has to integrate 2 struggling companies and in the process reform itself. The stately product development process that suffices for a luxury brand has to be speeded up for the more competitive markets that Mercedes, Chrysler and Mitsubishi now find themselves in. Or put another way, if the M-Class is very German and the Jeep is very American, what the hell is going to happen to those brands if they try and organize economies of scale by corrupting them so that they become the same? It is a huge problem. And one of the reasons why they have this problem is because they have not got a corporate management which has been separated from the brands. A lot of companies face this problem at the moment. Ford are doing this, I think, very, very cleverly. They've got the Jaguar S-Type there and the Lincoln on the bottom, both of which have very, very similar systems and subframes, but they look, feel entirely different from each other. They have different dealerships, they have different pricing structures, and they could not be more separate in the marketplace. So it can be managed, but it's a very difficult thing to do, and you have to be very clear about what you are. Or putting it another way, for global companies, they have to understand that national frontiers are beginning to look increasingly petty and artificial. They have to put national sentiment on one side and base themselves and their activities where it suits them best. But that does not mean that they should ignore the national brands which they manufacture. Those national brands, in many respects, must appear to remain part of the nation's heritage, even though they may be produced in places other than the country of original origin. Companies are having a stab at this. They're trying. British Petroleum is now describing itself as Beyond Petroleum. It's trying to become a multinational organization. To what extent it succeeds remains to be seen. British Airways tried and failed, so far at any rate, to go beyond Britain, because it could not reconcile the idea of its Britishness with the idea of a whole series of local tribal brands. It was probably the wrong way to do it, but it's easy in retrospect to talk about that. So the question we have to ask ourselves is there such an idea as a European brand, and if so, what would it look like? Well, there are one or two European brands, not many, and they don't look they don't look that different from anybody else's. Probably the most powerful and effective European brand in terms of market penetration, in other words, in terms of commercial success, is Airbus. But unless you're a bit of an aircraft freak, you can't tell the difference between Airbus and Boeing. They look the same. They may be different internally in certain respects, but that's largely to do with the airlines as much as it is to the manufacturers. There are differences, but they're not that great. Orange certainly doesn't come from any particular country, but it doesn't either look particularly European. Go is an airline that doesn't come from any particular country, but it doesn't look particularly European. Kuwait, again, is a petrol company that doesn't come from any particular country, but it doesn't look particularly European. If you ask someone who is not a European to define European brands, what is a European idea? What is the idea of a European brand? You get some very funny answers. I was talking to some people in Japan not that long ago about what is a classic American fizzy drink and what is a classic European fizzy drink. Well, it will not surprise you to learn that they thought that the classic American fizzy drink was Coca-Cola. They thought that the classic European fizzy drink was Perrier. For Japanese, you see, it's not French. It's upmarket, doesn't taste of much, it's expensive, it's a bit exotic, so it must be European. And sometimes it goes wrong, so that's even more reason. So these perceptions in people's minds are things that we have to deal with when we look at what you do in this extraordinarily rapidly changing world. So I've tried to make the argument for branding the nation. And the argument that I've made for branding the nation is a very simple one. That A, it's being done already and has been done for very many years. And B, they should therefore be done in a more coherent and cohesive fashion than has so far been the case. It certainly is true that although there has been attempts at national branding, some of which have been more, some of which have been less successful, there have also been attempts at regional branding. For example, the region between Copenhagen and Malmö, which is a region which exists between two countries, between Denmark and Sweden, is a new region. The Copenhagen-Malmö area means that Malmö will no longer look north to Stockholm, the capital of Sweden, for its world. It will look south towards Copenhagen, which is the regional center.